I think most of you probably figured out I'm African American. But what you don't know, I'm a Zionist. Thank you. Mr. Morton Klein is an award-winning activist on behalf of Israel and Jewish causes at home and abroad, as well as a leading voice on combating anti-Semitism globally, while painfully and truthfully making us aware of anti-Semitism throughout the United States. The Wall Street Journal has called Mr. Klein an outsized figure in the American Jewish struggle. He leans in to controversy. Sometimes I wish he wouldn't, but he always does, like taking on BLM, BDM, and with me, he has exposed and written about the anti-Semitism of Congress's squad. Have you heard of them? And their acolytes. And sadly, the anti-Semitism within the African American community. For his efforts, Mr. Klein was presented with the Zionist Organization of the World Award for the outstanding leadership in 2020 in Switzerland, with Miriam Adelson presenting that award. Congratulations. When the history of Jewish American advocacy to make America live up to its promise is finally written, Mort's name will be right there. When the history is finally written of brave Americans who defend Israel during turbulent times like these, Mort's name will be right there. When the history is written about those who have worked quietly and tirelessly to reestablish the Black-Jewish Alliance for justice, I'll be noted a little bit, but Mort will be on page 1. I think you get the picture of what I'm saying, so let's just get to the point. Please join me in a warm round of applause for Mr. Morton Klein, my friend, my brother, and fellow Zionist.
Well, wow. Kiron, thank you so much for coming all the way from California, from Pepperdine University, where she is a full professor. Prior to that, she was a full professor at Carnegie Mellon University. And she did yeoman's work in the State Department as Director of Policy Planning there for many, many years. And she's one of the smartest people, one of the most eloquent people I've really ever known in this business. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to shorten my remarks. In our Passover Haggadah, we read every Pesach, we read this: in each and every generation they rise up against the Jews to destroy us. And the Holy One, blessed be He, God Almighty, rescues us from their hands. That's been true throughout our Jewish history. We were slaves in Egypt. We survived. Haman attempted genocide of the Jews. We survived. The Greeks outlawed Judaism. We survived. 2,000 years ago, the Romans massacred 600,000 Jews. They renamed our homeland of Judea and Samaria Philistinia to stick it to us, to name it after our archenemy, the Philistines. And we survived. In 624, Muhammad's Muslims beheaded 600 Jews, beginning major massacres of the Jewish people. In the first and second Christian crusades against the Jews, massacring large numbers, we survived. They blamed the Jews for the Black Plague. They blamed the Jews for using blood of Christian children for our matzah, and they murdered us throughout Europe for this. But we survived. They expelled us from France and Germany and Hungary and Austria. In 1492, they threw us out of Spain and Portugal. There were pogroms throughout Russia and elsewhere against us. Of course, the monstrous Holocaust where 3/4 of European Jewry, 1/3 of all of Jewry, were mercilessly massacred. And even in 1948, when we established our little sacred, holy Jewish state of Israel, 6 Arab countries wouldn't allow it, and they tried to destroy us, invading Israel. We had many losses, but Israel was reestablished as a Jewish state. So they tried and tried throughout history. They fail every time because the resilience and perseverance and courage of the Jewish people, with the help of Almighty God, we overcame every single attempt at genocide, and we Jews will overcome and survive this latest challenge as well. What lessons need to be learned? Had Israel not forcibly thrown out 9,000 Jews, nobody talks about this, and the IDF from northern Gaza, this tragedy, this massacre would never have occurred. Israel can never give away any more of our holy land to a terrorist Hamas or a terrorist Palestinian regime. Never. Doing so only shows Jewish fear and weakness and energizes and inspires our Muslim and Arab and other enemies. And it gives them more land from which to better operate their ugly plans. No more concessions. No more concessions. And what else energized the Muslims and the Arabs, the hateful ones? Our U.S. government, Joe Biden, recently, publicly and wrongly, condemned Israel for allegedly veering away from democratic values with the judicial reform issue. They attacked Israel's domestic policies. Joe Biden has no business talking about Israel's domestic policies. It's none of his damn business. His administration funded, yes, funded, anti-Israel government protests and refused to meet with Israel's prime minister at the White House. This encouraged, energized, and inspired Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah and other terrorist groups that Israel did not have the U.S. as a true friend and a true ally. And this administration has refused, and the Democratic Party, I say this only as a fact, not as a partisan statement, has refused to condemn by name our own Jew-hating Israel haters in Congress, like Tlaib and Omar and McClintock and Presley and AOC and others. Our President Biden has even publicly praised some of them. This, again, encourages and energizes and strengthens our enemies. Almost no Jewish groups, this is very upsetting, complain when our U.S. government, Joe Biden and Blinken and Obama, appointed numerous people to important posts in the government that are hostile to Israel, that are pro-BDS people to important posts. Robert Malley was the chief U.S. negotiator to Iran. He's overtly pro-Iran, anti-sanctions, and pro-Hamas. Maher Bitar, director of intelligence at the National Security Council, used to be executive director of Students for Justice in Palestine, a vicious anti-Semitic group. He used to hold seminars at Georgetown, Maher Bitar did, of how to demonize Israel. And Biden made him director of intelligence. Hadi Amar, the most important negotiator between Israel and the United States, is Hadi Amar. Hadi Amar has proclaimed on a number of occasions the Intifada terror war against his Jews. This inspires me. You hear this? He publicly said, killing and maiming Jews inspires me. He supports BDS. And yet Biden and Blinken and Obama, and I say Obama because many of these people were Obama's friends, and I believe he had a hand in this. And what's most troubling, not a single Jewish group except the Zionist Organization of America said one negative thing about these appointments. Had we screamed against it, he would have to have withdrawn these appointments. And there was nothing but a deafening silence. Nothing but a deafening silence. We cannot allow that in the future. We have to speak out. When things happen that are against our interests, we must speak out and scream and not praise and promote. Let me tell you, the Conference of Presidents, the umbrella group of the 51 Jewish organizations, they have not allowed me at certain meetings at the White House or with administration people saying, we don't want you there, Mort, because you keep attacking the people he appoints, and he may not like it if he sees you there. Yes, yes. That's what I and we really have to deal with, of our frightened appeasement Jewish leaders. And Jewish groups, and Deborah Lipstadt, the left-wing U.S. envoy on anti-Semitism, has praised and accepted as a valuable tool, besides the IRA definition, which is a good one. In the official report, they say we also accept the nexus definition of anti-Semitism to be part of our war against anti-Semitism. Deborah Lipstadt, Joe Biden, Blinken accepted this. This definition says, if you oppose Israel's very existence, that you're opposed that it should survive, that's not necessarily anti-Semitism. That's what we passed. That's what Jews accepted. Deborah Lipstadt accepted it, and so did all the Jewish groups. Again, we are the only ones who spoke out against it. Our enemies saw all this, and were encouraged and energized by our government weakening support toward the Jewish state and toward the Jews. And now Biden says we have to give $100 million to the Gaza Arabs because they're just the innocent civilians. They're not Hamas. They're just innocent civilians trying to make a living and live a decent life, the Gaza Arabs. Oh, really, Mr. Biden? Their own polls from Birzeit University only a week ago, 89% of the innocent Gaza Arabs, who have nothing to do with Hamas, 89% support Hamas, support murdering Jews, support destroying Israel, and they voted for Hamas to be their leaders. They are not innocent civilians. By the way, you hear my sounds. I say it many times. I have Tourette syndrome, a neurochemical disorder that causes me to make these sounds, unfortunately. And that's why the first woman that showed any interest in me, I married her instantly. I did not want to be alone. And our administration says nothing about these insane rallies. At the rallies, you hear more than anything else, you can't hide. You're helping commit genocide. Genocide against the Palestinian Arabs in 1948. There were 150,000 Palestinian Arabs in the Israel area. Today, it's gone from 150,000 to 2 million Palestinian Arabs. Whoever's in charge of Israel's genocide program must be fired immediately. It's not working. You know, I said that in response to a question about genocide when I spoke at Brown University. The next day in the Brown University newspaper, they said Mr. Klein expressed chagrin that the genocide program wasn't working. Brown University. Fortunately, I did not go to Brown, so I didn't know what the word chagrin meant, so it didn't upset me. So, by the way, and the whole world, including America, are screaming about disproportionate response. When you go to war, you use everything at your disposal to crush your enemy. Everything at your disposal. If I walk down the street and somebody punches me in my face, I only get one punch back. I'll hit him 27 times until he falls down and will never hurt me again. Let me tell you what Colin Powell says about how we should respond when we fight terrorists in Afghanistan, when we were doing that. He said we should use the biggest SOB on the block rule. We should enter fights with every bit of force available to us. We should go in with full force from the beginning, or don't go in at all. We have to use overwhelming U.S. force. And he said we have to use all the force necessary and do not apologize for going in big. America and all generals throughout the world know you use everything you got to destroy your enemy. Everything. And yet, Biden and Blinken and Obama and others are demanding that Israel would pull back. They're demanding that Israel should only fight them for another month or so. We fought in Afghanistan for 7 months, not 1 month, 7. And in that fight and the fight against Iraq, 150,000 civilians were killed. You don't know that because it wasn't written about. No one said a word about it. Only when Jews in self-defense, inadvertently, unintentionally, in a war kills civilians, the whole world goes berserk. The whole world goes berserk. What army in the world drops leaflets into neighborhoods and say, get out, we're going to bomb the building? Drops sound bombs that hit the roof to let people know we're going to bomb it, get the hell out. Israel is the only power on earth, army on earth, that goes to those lengths. And yet these people accuse us of genocide. It's the opposite of genocide. We do everything to protect civilians. And we don't have our administration speaking out about this. And let me just finally say, we, the Jews, and the world must understand, this Arab-Islamic war against the Jews is not about land or a Palestinian state. If it was, it would have been resolved in the 30s when they were offered a state in the 30s, and they were offered a state 7 more times. It would have been resolved. This is a religious war against non-Muslims, against Buddhists, Hindus, and Christians. I don't call this a war between good and bad, between barbarism and civility. I am pained to say I call this a religious war. And the president of Egypt, President al-Sisi, recently speaking to Al-Azhar University, the most important university on Islam in the world in Cairo, Egypt, he said to the leaders who are religious scholars and religious Islamic leaders, he said, this is al-Sisi of Egypt, is it possible that 2 billion Muslim people should want to kill the rest of the world's inhabitants? That's 7 billion people. It's impossible. We are in need of a religious revolution, said al-Sisi. You imams are responsible before Allah. The entire world is waiting. It is inconceivable that thinking that we hold most sacred should cause the entire Islamic nation to be a source of anxiety, of danger, of killing and destruction for the rest of the world. This is impossible. We need a religious revolution. This is the Muslim leader of Cairo, and we shouldn't be afraid to say it. And one way to begin to minimize the Arab-Islamic war against the Jews and others in the West is for countries, especially the U.S., to stop funding, legitimizing, whitewashing, incentivizing the radical Islamic world. And there should be no talk of handcuffing Israel's ability to destroy the Islamic terror groups. No talk. We need a constant worldwide and UN condemnation of Hamas, Abbas, Fatah, Hezbollah, and others. And an end to talk of rewarding Islamic hatred, violence, and terror with a Palestinian state. We have to stop funding UNRWA, which teaches Arab children to hate, to kill, and to murder. We have to stop funding the Palestinian Authority. President Trump stopped the funding. He said no more money until you stop paying Arabs to murder Jews. Abbas pays Arabs lifetime pensions at 5 times the rate of an average salary to murder Jews. And Trump said no more money for that. And Biden came in and increased it from $500 million. We now give Mahmoud Abbas $800 million and ignore the fact that he uses a chunk of that to murder innocent Jewish people. And I must say, I have to say, painfully, I blame in part Israeli leaders, Jewish leaders, and rabbis for not speaking out about the things I've just said, for not speaking out about the fact there is no occupation. There was never a country of Palestine. It was a region. Britain, which controlled this area legally, gave it to the Jews for a state. 40%. All of Gaza was given away to the Arabs by Israel. 40% was given over for autonomy of Judea and Samaria. That's where 99% of the Arabs live, which means there's no occupation. The Palestinian Arabs, the Gaza Arabs, control their own lives, their own parliament, their own schools, their own textbooks, newspapers, radio and TV, businesses, police force. There is no occupation. Why has no Israeli leader said that? Why has no Jewish leader said that except for us? Why are no rabbis not preaching that from the pulpit? And they use this lie in every rally. End the occupation, end the oppression. It's a lie. And yet, none of our leaders talk about it. And we have to stop talking about Jerusalem. Jerusalem is, as many of you know, not only is it never mentioned in the Koran, not only has no Arab leader except from Jordan visited Jerusalem when they controlled it because they didn't give a damn about it. The majority of people living in Jerusalem have been Jews since the mid-1800s, the majority. And they say, well, our prophet has gone from Jerusalem to heaven. It's holy to us. He went from Jerusalem to heaven, our prophet, on a winged horse. Well, if you read the Quran, what does it say? It says Muhammad had a dream. It didn't even happen. It was a dream. And he went from the furthest mosque to heaven. It doesn't say Jerusalem. Jerusalem's a famous city. They could have said Jerusalem. Didn't say Jerusalem. The farthest mosques. Now, how do I know that the farthest mosque couldn't be in Jerusalem where the Prophet Muhammad went to heaven? Because when the Quran was written, there wasn't a single mosque in all of Jerusalem, so it is impossible. Jerusalem is not holy to Muslims, and we, Jews, Jewish leaders, Israeli leaders and rabbis have to start saying that regularly. No more discussion of Jerusalem. It's ours. It's always been ours. It's never been Islamic. We Jews didn't come to Eretz Yisrael as colonialists. They call us colonialists. We came neither like the British imperialists, nor like the French colonizers in Algeria, nor like the English and Dutch settlers in South Africa. We did not come like immigrants seeking a new continent, a new homeland. We Jews came back home as the inhabitants of a country who we Jews were driven away from it by force. And yet you see the whole world screaming. You're killing it. Kamala Harris only yesterday said, Israel intentionally kills civilians. Yes, she said intentionally. Those are her words. The whole world is saying, stop the attack on this barbarism. Stop the attack on Hamas. The whole world is demanding Israel withdraw and stop. The whole world says we're wrong. Can we be right and the whole world wrong? Well, what is our history on that issue? We destroyed the Iran nuclear reactor in 1991. The whole world condemned us for doing it. It was wrong. Well, they were wrong and we were right. The whole world was polytheistic. We alone, we Jews, preach belief in one God. We preached the day of rest. The whole world mocked us as lazy. We were right and the whole world was wrong. They said we crucified a Jew, Jesus. We never crucified anything. We never would allow such a thing. The whole world was wrong and we were right. They said we poisoned the wells of Europe. We denied it. It was a lie. The Crusades, the blood libels, the Talmud burnings in England and France, leading these nations to expel Jews for centuries. The Spanish and Portuguese Inquisition, the ghettos and the Mortara case in Italy, Dreyfus in France, Baylis in Russia. The whole world condemned us for that. The entire world in all of these cases and more. The entire world was wrong. We Jews were right. And today, once again, we alone are right. And the whole world is wrong about how we're handling the Hamas massacre, the Hamas terrorists. So, I want to end with a quote by Mark Twain. Many of you may know it. It inspires me. Mark Twain wrote about the Jews. The Jews constitute but 0.25% of the human race. It suggests a nebulous puff of stardust lost in the blaze of the Milky Way. The Jew ought hardly to be heard of, but he is heard of, has always been heard of. He is as prominent on the planet as any other people, and his importance is extravagantly out of proportion to the smallness of his bulk. His contributions to the world's list of great names in literature, science, art, music, finance, medicine, and abstract learning are out of proportion to the weakness of the Jews' numbers. The Jews have made a marvelous fight in this world at all the ages, and the Jews did it with their hands tied behind their backs. He could be vain of himself and be excused for it. Other nations filled the planet with sordid splendor. Then they faded to dream stuff, never to be heard again. For a while, they held their torch high for a time, but it burned out, and they sit in twilight now. They vanished. But the Jew, we Jews, we saw them all, we survived them all, and is now what we always were, says Twain. We exhibit no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of our parts, no slowing of our energies, no dulling of our alert and aggressive mind. All things are mortal but the Jews. All other forces pass, but the Jew remains. Our holy Torah promises that we are an eternal people, never to be destroyed. And so it has been, and so it will be, and continue to be. The Jewish people will survive. We must be strong, and we will be. We must be not afraid, for God is with us. The cause of Israel is moral and just. We must act and speak out with courage. Truth, justice, and God are on the side of Israel and the Jewish people. Our holy Torah promises that we're an eternal people, never to be destroyed. So it has been, and so it will continue to be. And with the help of Almighty God, with the help of the extraordinary Israel Defense Forces, with the help of the Jewish people like you in this room and around the world, the people of Israel shall dwell in our holy land for eternity. We will surely prevail. God bless all of you for being here. Thank you very, very much.